chapter 24, 25. And it's within a number of writings about the Lord's second coming, or that's what we'd call it today. Sorry, I've lost my place. I'm joining you, Marge. It's called the parable of the talents. And I had to look up what actually a talent was. I thought I could come along and tell you that it was going to be, 10 cents or something like that. But when I looked it up, a talent is a measure of presumably gold weight, equivalent to 6,000 days' work. Okay. So probably more than 2 million in one talent. Let's read the story. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I know that you are a hard man, harvesting where you've not sown and gathering where you've not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and I hid your talent in the ground. See, I have brought back what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Thanks, Lynn. Interesting that George Orwell said in his book 1984 that all animals are created equal and some are created more equal than others. And when you see that, that parable actually represents that. So we've got one guy who's given 3 talents, another guy who's given 2, another guy who's given 1. And as you look at society, as you look around the world, you see that seems to be the case. Some have got more than others. And it seems that some are given 3, 2 or 1. And you ask yourself, why is it? Why are some people created more equal than others? Is it education? Is it teaching? Is it opportunity? Is there a cycle of poverty that we need to break up? And we see in this parable a reflection of reality. Now, talents. Lynn has told us what they're worth. Often when you're preaching on it, you like to think in terms of skills and abilities. And that was my first thought when I read it. Some are given more skills than others. And here's a trivia question for you. This is for the guys particularly, and for Bev because she follows Collingwood. Tell me the names of a player that you know who played AFL football and also represented Australia in cricket? Keith Miller, that's right, that's one. That's one. I can think of three.
Bedford.
Peter Bedford? Yes, that's right. He Brownlow medalist. Did he play Test cricket or just state cricket?
Just state.
State cricket. All right, you're out, mate. You lost the money. Anybody else? Simon O'Donnell, Laurie Nash, Brownlow medalist, and he played. Yeah, I've got another one here. Who was the other one? I put down Carey, the wicketkeeper, but he never quite made it to the league level. He was on the brink, and he got kicked out and decided to take on Test cricket. And it seems when you look at that, there's talents around, there are skills around, and some people have got heaps more than others. But as Lynn has pointed out, this parable is not about talent, as we understand talent, it's about money. And there's a guy who's given plenty, and he gives even more. And then the one who received 1 talent, verse 24, came forward and said, Master, I knew that you are a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So the guy who buried his treasure in the ground, was a guy who, if you like, put the blame back on the owner. And we know a prominent American politician who can do that very, very effectively. Now, why is he condemned? He is condemned because he did nothing about it. And when you see this parable, it's a hard one to understand. When you see this parable, it seems as if Jesus is saying, having lots of money is a good idea. And let's spend our lives making money and on behalf of others and become very wealthy. But when you look at Jesus' teaching, generally, you discover that that's not the case. It seems to me he's saying, if you are wealthy, it can be a barrier to your Christian growth. And the book of James, which we'll be studying in our next series, says much the same type of thing. If you're wealthy, there's a greater sense of responsibility. And last week we looked at that verse where the guy who had a lot of money was told to give it away before he could become a follower of Jesus. And you see this, and this parable seems to be a contrast. But we need to understand it's a parable. We don't base our philosophy on money making on the sense of this parable. It has a message. And I believe the message is something like this, that we need to use it or we lose it. Now, I've taken a little bit of interest in the type of things you need to do to delay death. And we need to use things in order to delay illness and death. So I've worked out that according to the books I need to do 30 minutes of aerobic exercise every day. And then I need to do 30 minutes of stretching. I couldn't work out what I needed to stretch, but I had a go. And then we had to do Sudoku to keep the mind active, and you had to mix with a lot of people, and I'm not a very good mixer. And adding that all up, it took 65 hours a week and 65 hours a month in order to prolong my life. And how long a bonus would I get? For all that effort, I would get 3 months extra. Eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Now, the advice though is pretty good. We lose it or we use it or we lose it. And it's the same with life. Today, we'll never have again. And if you're trying to sell your calendar, your 22 calendar on the eBay, no one will buy it. The past is past, and today is a day of opportunity. And this parable is about opportunity. I remember once taking a funeral and met with the family to discuss Dad and what we were going to say about him. And, well, what can I say about Dad? I didn't know him. Well, he barracked for St Kilda. Okay, and what else? Nothing else, just he barracked for St Kilda. Did he have other... No, he just barracked for St Kilda. And the funeral was very, very short, I can tell you, because there was nothing to say. What a tribute, or what a lack of a tribute, that comes to us in our last day. Make sure that your tribute when you die, that whoever makes their tribute has a lot to say. And I'm a little bit worried about that, and I'll be designing my own tribute, and reading it out on recording. Now, I also remember I told you a few weeks ago about when we moved in at South Melbourne as students ministers, and the first knock on the door was a woman who had heard voices. The second knock on the door came from a lady who was worried about her son, her 32-year-old son. And what's the problem? Well, he just lies in bed every day. He won't get up, not interested in anything. Can you help? Oh, of course I can. I was 24 years old and I knew all about lying in bed and not getting up, and I could help her with this. So down I went and met this guy. He didn't want to meet me, but I made a speech about we need to be using our life. We're not meant to be lying in bed, and that speech was totally ignored. I had to get professional help because I realised what I didn't know. And when you see people like that, you realise it was a waste of life. Eventually, he recovered from depression and got on with his life. But when we think about that, we get up every day, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But are we metaphorically in bed? Are we metaphorically just letting the years go by, the days go by, the hours go by, the minutes go by without investing in life? Now, when you start thinking about that, you see a lost opportunity. Here's a question for you, another trivia question. A film made in 1989, and it starred Robin Williams, who was playing the role of John Keating, the teacher. Another clue, he's a teacher, yes?
Good Will Hunting.
Well, no, it wasn't Good Will Hunting.
Dead Poets.
Well done, Dead Poets Society. And the theme that comes through that time and time again is carpe diem, quoting an ancient philosopher. Seize the day, seize the day. And he said to the boys, make your life extraordinary. Seize the day, carpe diem. Now, I'm not expecting us to become a Wilberforce or a Margaret Teresa, but we need to think about whether life is just slipping by and there's not an opportunity that we're choosing. Now, I think the theme of this parable is saying, let's seize the opportunity, don't bury your treasure, but share it with others. Now, this guy understood what caution was about, and he buried the treasure because investment involves a risk. We all do it. About 6 years ago, I had a phone call, which you've all had, about solar panels. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll have to chat to this guy. And how much? He told me how much. And I said, how long would it take to get my money back that I've invested in saving electricity? And he said, about 5 years. And then I worked it out. Will we be in the same house in 5 years' time? Worse than that, will I be alive in 5 years' time? And I said, I took the risk. And now, 6 years later, the solar panels have paid for themselves and I can leave this earth if I want to. Now, what the parable seems to be doing is it seems to be saying the risk takers get rewarded. And I've said before, but listen to it, every great church we have in Australia, the great churches I've seen in the States, and when we think of their history, somewhere along the line there has been a risk taken, where they step out into the unknown, not knowing what the unknown will hold. And I guess this guy was so cautious that he didn't want to take a risk. I think of the incident in 2 Kings. There were 4 lepers sitting outside the city gate. And the city was in trouble. It was besieged by the Syrians. And starvation was known. And the 4 lepers, gaunt, starving, thin, decide that they would think about their future. And they said, if we go back into the city, we starve of starvation. If we go out to the Syrian camp, they'll probably kill us, but they might give us something to eat. What have we got to lose? What have we got to lose? And the common phrase they used was, will we sit here until we die? You know the story. They go out to the camp, and the Syrians had nicked off because they thought they were going to be invaded by a great army. They had a great feast because the Syrians left their food behind, and then they went back and shared the good news with others. Sit we here till we die. This guy was cautious and buried his treasure beneath the ground. But it's not only about being cautious, it's telling us something about burying the truth. And whenever I read a parable in Matthew's Gospel, I ask myself, what did this mean to the Hebrews? Because it's a very Hebrew-type parable, a Hebrew-type Gospel. What did it mean to the Hebrews? Where is Israel in the story? And I believe what it's saying to us is Israel had the truth, and they buried it. And to find mission, to find outreach, find concern about the wider world in the Old Testament, it's hard to find. Abraham was told that his descendants would be a blessing to the nation. I guess the story of Jonah is the story of mission, reaching out to others. But after the exile, the Hebrews just closed in upon themselves and refused to have anything to do with the wider world. They were scared of contamination. Now, sometimes as a church we do that. Sometimes unwittingly we put a fence around the church. Sometimes unwittingly we exclude people who have not yet come. And we rarely say, look, come along and meet my friend, meet my church. And when we think about that, we ask ourselves, does this parable relate to us in some way? Have we buried the treasure? The other thing about the parables in Matthew's Gospel, there's always a sense of accountability that is there. Always judgment. Remember the story of the 10 virgins, 5 had their lamps filled and 5 forgot. They were shut out. When the parable, the master who goes away and comes back and finds the tenants have abused their property, they get chucked out. There's always this feeling that there's going to be something accountable which we have to answer for. And all of the parables in Matthew's Gospel, or most of them, have an image of hell. Now, I'm not going to bore you with my views on hell, but what you find with that is that the images vary. Some are cast out into the outer darkness, where there'll be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Some are sort of in hell, burning up and all that type of thing. The images differ, and I wouldn't be having a theology of hell based on Matthew's Gospel. I would just say that it's teaching us about accountability. Now, I learnt that. In my full-time ministry, I was always involved in a team. And I found in 1990, I think I've told you this, a guy who was in charge of welfare in the National Bank. He said to me, if you don't have reviews for your team will just go in their own direction. And I learnt about the fact that we had to have annual reviews, 6 monthly reviews, and if the team wasn't performing well, team member, 3 monthly reviews. And it helped keep us on track because it helped us understand what accountability was really all about. Now, we think of some people who have been very evil in our world. General Pinochet, Chile, who was there, 1993 to 2010. He died. He was just about to be put up in court and tried for the abuses and corruption that he brought to Chile. And he died 3 days before his court hearing. Or just before the Russians came storming in Berlin in 1945, Hitler committed suicide just before he would have been punished for what he'd done. And Putin will probably die a natural death, but a lot of people are advising him to be very careful what he eats. And when you see this, you start to see that there seems to be people escaping accountability. But the gospel seems to be saying there is some form of accountability. I'm not sure what the form is, but there are implications for it as well. We might think that we haven't got much to offer. One of the problems we've got is putting ourselves down and saying, what's the point in me investing in others? Let me tell you a story. Many years ago, I was invited when I was on the Home Mission Department following Alan. I was invited down to Port Arthur to preach. This is before the massacre occurred. And it was a tiny little church, and I preached my heart out, and I didn't think there was going to be any response. So the Sunday night, the final night of the little mission, a 14-year-old guy wanders out and makes a commitment to Christ. That 14-year-old, Craig Spalding, went on to be the senior minister of the Launceston Church. He led that church through change, and of becoming a middle-sized church to becoming the largest church in Tasmania. And the implications of that investment in that 14-year-old was profound. And I think of that, and Craig reminds me of it whenever he bumps into me. I think of that, and I think of the people who have invested in you. And the investment has brought fruit many, many, many times. And I think the parable is saying to us, am I investing in others? Am I investing in life? Am I making a difference? And if not, there's a system of accountability which we need to think about. Don't bury your treasure beneath the ground. And it makes me think of Jesus. Coming to a remote part of the earth, born in Bethlehem, traded as a carpenter, takes on a mission at the age of 30, invests in 12 guys who 11 make it, and then he goes and he said one day he'll come back. And I think of that investment of life. And that investment in those 11 disciples created a major change in the world. And you think of the implications going on and on and on and on. And we're here today because Christ invested in us. It's remarkable. And I suppose when we think of that investment, I'm leading into communion, we think of gratitude. We think of Christ giving his life for us. When I'm saying giving his life, I mean his total life as well as the cross. And we think of the implications, and we think that we stand in the shadow of it all. And he's saying to us, I've invested in you, invest in others. So when we come to communion, we do it with two thoughts in mind. We do it with the thought of reflecting on how we are using our life for the sake of Christ. But we also do it in the sense of we are standing in the shadow of the greatest gift of all. And when we think of his investment, we are truly grateful. So when we come to communion, come with an attitude of thanksgiving. Eucharistio, I give thanks. And let us celebrate the presence of Christ as we reflect on our own lives as well. Let's give thanks. God our Father, help us to be people who are investing in the lives of other people. Help us to be grateful for what you have done. And Father, help us to use the great investment you've made in us, that we might be people who are witnesses, people making a difference, people who are the salt of the earth, light of the world. Help us, Father, as we come to this communion time, to reflect on who we are and what we are meant to be. But above all, Father, hear our gratitude for the greatest gift of all. We pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. Come, celebrate communion with a sense of thanks.